Hey folks, after 3 or 4 mistakes, I'm doing this. That Mercury station is getting me. Talking about the current financial dangers, case study here on things with this coronavirus and whatnot. I'm, coming back to talk about this subject again. Um, Before I do, I want to not forget to invite people to like, subscribe, to get notified of things here as well. So if you like the video, make sure to like it, subscribe to the channel so you can get notified. Also share it with others if you like what I'm doing here. So I'm going to be talking about this, this current situation of things that are going on right now. Of course, this coronavirus has definitely spread and certainly created more of a panic than I had thought, than I had hoped. When it first came out, I definitely it looked as though there was going to be a better effort at containment, and even though that might have been an attempt, at least for what we've seen now, I'm going to try to avoid getting too judgmental about all kinds of things that have happened, but it looks like there were delays and not taking it so seriously, especially here in the US and in other countries, especially Italy. It's really taken a, really been quite, widespread. And we're also now seeing a financial hit where markets around the world are reacting and even starting to crash a little bit because of the fears of what this might mean. So what I want to do here with this case study here, or today, is to actually do a couple comparisons of we had a big financial collapse in 2008. 2007, and I'm going to be looking at those charts. I'm also going to be looking at like this is the financial collapse of 2008. That chart. Also, we have the Hong Kong flu where 1 million people were dead in 1968. We'll look at that chart. And again, this is also the chart of the first corona death from the coronavirus to see like at least when we started to see it affect the public and whatnot. And this is the last time we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. So these are a few things that are coming up that I'm also just going to talk about here a little bit. And so just wanted to let people know that. I also wanted people to know that, because I haven't spoken about it in a while and people have asked me, that you can get, there's also a 2020 forecast that I have available if people want to look. I do describe, first of all, Saturn and Capricorn for your sign and what to commit to for the next couple of years. As we saw, the chart right now, Saturn is going through Capricorn. It's going to be there for the next couple of years. And so, again, this is a very powerful time, especially with that Saturn energy. But we're also going to see, and we're also at a point right now where, as you can see in this web class that I did for 2020, I talked about these things right now. March 22nd through May 4th, Mars is exalted in Capricorn. March 29th through June 29th, Jupiter's in Capricorn. So March 29th through May 4th, all three of them are in Capricorn. So I talked about this time that's coming up on this free web class. And again, you can get that if you go to this here, this web address, this 2020 Vedic Astrology.com. If you go there, 2020 VedicAstrology.com, it gives you this page. You just click reserve my seat now. You can either watch it immediately, instant replay, or you can pick a time in the near future and watch this web class. And again, you'll really be able to see how Saturn will affect your sign for the next couple years. But then you'll also go through these other important shifts. And we're still early in the year. And you can see I go through these shifts all throughout the year. So I just want people to also know about that, so that you can be prepared. Now, again, I'm going to be looking at these charts here. several of these charts. This is where we are today. This is March 9th, 2020. One second. So you see we're having these financial issues that are coming up, a lot of it around the coronavirus fear, and also, a thing with oil prices and things like that. Oil really has a lot to do with two signs. It has to do with Capricorn and Scorpio, and also Mars and Ketu. These are all somewhat related. We see this close Mars-Ketu conjunction right now. Again, the reason Ketu is there is because we have a drill. We have to drill for oil and pull it out of the earth. That kind of drilling has a lot to do with Ketu, and this is why it's also a lot to do with Scorpio energy. Capricorn also, Capricorn also has to do with things like hard assets and investments. And of course, now even our monetary system revolves around things like petrodollars and all this kind of stuff, again. And so you can definitely see the pressure and the stress of those things with this Saturn also in Capricorn. So you can see a lot of these things coming together right now with this Mars-Ketu and also Mars-Jupiter. I'm going to be doing an update on Mars-Jupiter tomorrow for those who are watching. That'll be important to watch as well, because this Mars-Jupiter conjunction coming together is really important. But today here, on Monday, we had this big financial correction. It's not a collapse, but it's a big correction on this full moon in Leo. So again, I've also been talking about this full moon, a big thing that's been happening here. I made a big deal about this full moon, which I talked about it being the nature of the king, which is like Leo, and Aquarius being like the people. And again, we have to remember, and I also said this before, that nowadays the kings and the governments, which is related to Leo, are really business leaders, business kings. The governments themselves are like surrogates for business. So in some ways, the kind of king of the world is this monetary system. This kind of stock market, whatever, is a real sign of the power that we have. Notice how once the markets start doing things, all of the kings and the leaders start going, oh God, here's all of our power, revolving around this fiat capital that's floating all around the world. So again, we saw here on this full moon in Leo, which happened today. Let me move this time back. And the full moon, this full moon, again, it was in Purva Falguni, happened like around this time. So by 10 a.m., Pacific time. But really, by the time we woke up here in the U.S., early in the morning, around the world, the global markets just started to drop. So the U.S. stock market also just really dropped. And this is right on the full moon in Purva Falguni. So again, watch this stuff. That's why I do it. That's why I talk about this stuff. And that's why I do it this way and show you. You can go back and watch my video on the full moon in Leo and see that I was talking about the governments, the kings being power, and the sharing power in contrast to the people, to the population, to the masses, to the society. So you see that the society is in chaos right now. We have these coronavirus fears. We don't know how it's going to disrupt a lot of things. It could disrupt like supply chains and food distribution. It could, who knows what, I don't think it's going to get that drastic. But right now there's the fear of it, the fear. What did I say about the full moon? Full moon is really a time where we have a lot of this. We're very full of our mind and our emotions, and we're reacting very emotionally. Look at what the market did. It said, oh my God, panic. Where's all our power? Where's our money? Where is all of, are we going to lose all our power? I want to sell and sell and sell and get rid of and sort of cash in the capital that I have invested, right? So we saw that sort of panic on the full moon in Leo, right? Opposite the sun in Aquarius. Again, Aquarius is ruled by Saturn. It's very much about gauging the feeling of the people and whatnot. So that's where we are right now. I want to look at that in relation to, this is the financial collapse. This was the day, September 15th, of the financial collapse that happened in 2007. And there's a couple things to look at of note. This was the, this isn't an exact time. This was the day of the, where what happened is, like, Lehman Brothers or one of the big banks went belly up. This was when we really knew we were in the midst of a big collapse. So the main things that I'm looking at, I'm not really looking at the moon like that day because it happened right around this time, but really look at the outer planets and the around this time. So we can see, first of all, Jupiter was almost at the same place. It was about 12 years ago. You could see Jupiter was at 18 in Purvashada. Now it's at 26. It's in Uttarashada, but it just went in there a couple weeks ago. But we started feeling this pressure. You see, it's very close to the exact Jupiter return of this financial collapse that threatened the whole global economic system because of the derivative mortgages and all that stuff. Very similar Jupiter here. And again, look, it's in Sagittarius, its own sign. Very tricky, huh? And we can also see that in this case, Mars is very close to, Mars in the sky now is very close to where Jupiter was at that time. So is Ketu. So again, we can see the similarity. And again, Jupiter in Sagittarius, why would that be the case? Well, first of all, Jupiter would have entered Sagittarius earlier. It's 18 degrees. And again, the issue with Jupiter, especially as it relates to wealth and other things, has to do with this over expansion and a potential for correction, a potential for loss. Because again, with Jupiter, there's often an excess. And let me just say this also to be fair, because I also know that at the time, those who were practicing Western astrology legitimately said, well, Jupiter was in Capricorn at that time using the tropical zodiac. So I'm always fair and honest. In this regard, you could definitely see where Jupiter in Capricorn, tropical, would have, could have made just as much sense or more sense in that regard, because of, and again, this is how Western astrology works. Using that zodiac, you could definitely see how that could make sense. But definitely the other way to read it, and especially as we're seeing now, in this sense, in particular, we have where, Mars and Ketu are very close to that same point, and you got these two difficult planets with Jupiter in Sagittarius, which is trying to correct the excesses, the mistakes, from the excess, and from speculation or from floating too much capital, which is what winds up happening. And we also see there's an opposite here. You see the sun is in Leo with Saturn, Sun-Saturn in Leo, and now we have sun is almost opposite that place, and we have this full moon. So again, you see similarities here to Leo and Aquarius from the last time that this happened. So, this is why I was talking about this nature of Leo and Aquarius has a lot to do with government. And of course, the power of government and institutions now have to do with the finances, the financial end, which also certainly is related to Saturn. And so this these are important things to consider. One second. So we could see the similarity to when we had this collapse back here. I'm just looking here. Yeah, so we also see at that time, and I remember this, but Rahu in Capricorn. Of course, Capricorn is very much about it's about financial planning and about assets being allocated forward with, especially, hard assets. And what happened in 2008 is that they couldn't make the literal payments for the capital that had been floated. All those mortgages, there was too much that was not accounted for on the books, where they wrote all of these phony debts that couldn't be paid, and it just sort of trickled down. One institution couldn't pay another, and then before you know it, there's no money. There's no actual assets. And again, those actual assets is related to Capricorn and eventually that bill being due. So we see here we have Rahu in Capricorn in 2007. Now we have Saturn there in Capricorn. And again, Saturn in Capricorn is going to insist it's going to be a corrective kind of nature to say, okay, do you have the receipts? Do you have the assets? Because if not, now the bill is going to be due. Now you need to not just float credit and then this creditor floating credit from the previous one and on and on and on, like a infinite, level of tortoises. Now we need to actually, somebody needs to insist on getting paid. That's what Saturn is now. In Capricorn, it's very much about the bill coming due on many levels. And again, Saturn had just gone through Sagittarius, where again, for a couple years, we're just floating and riding high. By the way, Saturn had been in Capricorn since early 2017, which the market went crazy. It went crazy after Trump got elected. Again, every economist who cared more than just stock market as being, everything's great, look at the stock market. They're like, no, everything's not great, look at the stock market, because the debt is ballooning. And then Trump passes a tax break for all to give all the wealth of almost $2 trillion of wealth. Takes it out of the economy, basically gives it to wealthy, and all they did is buy back stock. They didn't put anything back into the economy. And people are like, this is going to be disastrous if we have another crash, because now we don't have resources. He just gave it away. So it's been a precarious house of cards. While Saturn was going through Sagittarius, though, it's like, oh, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. Oh, it's fine. Saturn goes into Capricorn and says, now we need to pay the bill. Is there any money there? I think this is one of the, this could be ugly. Because again, the reason we were able to bail out at this time, at the financial collapse, regardless of what anyone thinks about it, we actually bailed out all of those industries, and the industries paid it back. Now, again, there were people that maybe should have been went to jail for this, but we had the money to do it. We don't have the money now. Actually, it went a couple $1 trillion in tax breaks that the economy did not need, that they didn't need. Those people didn't need it. Instead of investing in infrastructure in the economy and the people, it went there primarily. So this is why it's precarious right now, for sure. So these are some parallels here to look at. Now, I want to look, and I haven't actually looked this over so much, but right now, of course, we're also looking at the coronavirus. And just to look, this is the chart from like the first death. This time isn't correct, but it was right after the eclipse in January. The eclipse in January happened on the 10th, and it was right, I think it was the 10th here in the West. You see, it was Pratipada after the full moon. So after that eclipse is when we started having the deaths. Now, of course, the virus was probably growing all during this time, probably since that December 25th eclipse. Again, probably much earlier than that as well. It had been unleashed or released. But what happened is this eclipse that happened, I'm going to go back a couple weeks. I'm going back to last year. This is when we really started to see, again, whether it was unleashed at this time literally. But remember when we talked about this eclipse on December 25th in Mula Nakshatra. This was last year, December 25th, 5th, 26th, the 26th in China. This full moon in Mula, which is related to the goddess Kali, who's the goddess of what? Destruction and death and transformation and change and blah. This is when this really started to get unleashed. And then by a couple weeks later, this was the eclipse in Ardra, and then shortly thereafter, the first death was reported. But again, it was I don't know the exact date. Maybe somebody can who does, where it was initially unleashed on the world, and where it jumped from one creature to another, etc. And so we can see this connection back at this time to when the severity and when this was unleashed. At least I would think this is probably around the time when it started infecting people quite a bit, around this time. And so where we are now, of course, is we're up here now, and we just, again, it's just getting more and more severe. This is a couple months later. We just had this full moon. Again, after this full moon, whoops. So again, notice all these lunation cycles. This is the other reason I'm talking about it. So again, it just keeps getting more and more. It's now increasing more and more on this full moon. Here, this is where we are right now. It's getting more and more, especially in our mass consciousness. It's starting to become even more, create even more paranoia. Italy is on lockdown. Here in the US, things are getting canceled and whatnot, but life isn't as disrupted yet as it is in other parts of the world. So what we have coming, I'm going to move this forward a few weeks, and you'll see that what's going to happen is Jupiter is going to, Mars goes into Capricorn, and then Jupiter goes into Capricorn. Then we have all these planets in Capricorn for a while. Like I said, and I'll share this again just because it also has a timeline here. That we're now here. We're around this point right here. This March 22nd through May 4th. This is coming up, and that's when Mars goes into Capricorn, showing the capacity to fight for long-term goals, not just pop off, fighting the good fight. So again, when Mars goes into Capricorn, it's to really be a time where we're going to be having to fight to strengthen our systems, maybe our physical health systems. Again, all this rigorous effort and hard work, all these Capricorn things like testing people, testing each other, getting tested, being vigilant about, quarantining and stuff. Now we're seeing people, the big thing is like self-quarantine. We just found out here in the US that some even lawmakers have been exposed, and this whole thing of self-quarantine. If you remember back when I said this initially, I said, and I'll show the chart again in a minute, but one of the reasons I felt confident at first that they had addressed it, at least reasonably so, was there was immediately the effort to start quarantining people very quickly, which is very much about that powerful Saturn in Capricorn. And at the time, Venus was also exalted. Jupiter was also in Sagittarius. So at that time, it didn't create this panic and havoc. And it's actually since Venus went into Aries, I saw the drama escalate quite a lot. The cases escalate, and the sort of, again, finger pointing, angry at the response, all this stuff. Now we're in a place where a lot of people, most are, saw some polling, most are not happy with, at least in the US, the president's response. Again, he just seems to make things up and riff and talk and not understand. He's done contradicting himself 5 times in the same sentence, And that's fine most of the time when he's just riffing about fake news or whatever. But this is the problem when you have someone who is just completely undisciplined in their message and their speech, and we have a public health crisis where we need good information. You have zero confidence that he gets it, cares about it, and that's not good. Said on Friday, I have a natural ability with this, and everybody's just can't bragging or whatever he's doing is just not appropriate now. But that Saturn in Capricorn gave initial confidence that maybe they were going to take this seriously and get quarantining in effect like they did in China. But now that things have moved, again, now it's Venus in Aries. A lot of that it really didn't work as much as I had hoped or thought. So again, but as you can see, March 22nd through, actually, Jupiter will be in Capricorn until the end of June. 3 months, Jupiter is in Capricorn. It goes in and then retrogrades back out. It's definitely, this debilitated Jupiter does not bode well for a lot of things in this regard. So I think we're in for a rough couple months of just worry, paranoia, maybe some, financial stress and pressure with those transits. It's hard to see beyond that. Hopefully, maybe Mars going through Capricorn is going to really concentrate everybody's energy there and really focus it in a positive way. And we'll really get a handle on this in a much better way. And then by the time then that Jupiter goes retrograde and whatnot, we're then correcting and rebuilding the upheaval. But I think it's going to definitely, and overall, it's definitely something that can, ultimately make things stronger, particularly with this bloated, inflated economy and this vapid sense that, the economy's great. Look at the stock market, economy. And again, even things like job numbers. Yeah, most of the job numbers are people working in gig economy, driving for Uber and working at a cafe. What's going to happen to those jobs in the economy when people stop socializing as much? Stock market. Yeah, how many people are invested in the stock market? So yeah, I'm so happy the economy is great. All the billionaires and billionaires are doing fantastic. Yay. This is said by common people. And again, the people working 2 and 3 jobs and this sort of gig economy stuff. Again, one of the biggest hits to that this coronavirus and the fears around the coronavirus is it's literally saying, okay, sequester, now it's time to self-quarantine. Great. So now people don't go out. People don't go out to the cafe. People don't go to the convention. Again, these convention centers, when people go to conventions, it spins off all this value to all of the businesses around it. People go eat lunch at the cafe. They do this, they do that. You cancel the convention. It's not just the airline that's canceled, but it's the convention center, all those employees, all the people that work around it. This is where a lot of these jobs are. A lot of these jobs aren't there's some high tech for sure, but we have the statistics. Most of the jobs have been service industry and people doing 2 and 3 jobs, gig economy stuff. You don't have to ask me. Look around you. This is what people are doing now to supplement because their job isn't a living wage. Or they're either working a big high-tech thing or all of these mid-level jobs like labor jobs or jobs that aren't some kind of, you need an MBA or, some PhD or some kind of master's degree so you can be a programmer or some other job like that. All these mid-level jobs are gone in the economy. So it's service industry, some kind of gig work or some kind of professional work and not a lot in between. Labor force jobs. So again, even those things can get very disrupted. And this is, again, how the supply chains can get disrupted. And that can affect manufacturing jobs, all this stuff. So this whole thing, this could wear on for a while. So the biggest thing that the governments around the world, this government here in the US, again, I'm going to try not to get too aggressive here, but Mike Pence is the head of the task force and all this stuff. And then half of the cabinet coming out and saying, oh, it's contained over and over again. Like these people are like, again, watching the leaders. Again, we've just gotten used to this now in this country. But remember when there was at least a professional president who appointed professional people and would speak and would know what he was saying at least, and we could trust at least most of it? Again, just riffing like this, where they're constantly contradicting each other and never saying what we can all see is true. We've just gotten used to it. It's a level of dysfunction that is ridiculously dangerous all the time, let alone something like, while we have a mass health issue that could turn into a crazy epidemic. Now, again, because I know I'm not as worried about the bumbling administration in charge, although it's not comforting at all, because I know that there are people in these agencies that are being responsive, that are getting kits, and that are ready to mobilize now like crazy. And I think that's what's really going to happen, particularly in the next week or two, as we see these transits. As we see these transits, we're going to see this full court press. Let me go back here. We're going to see this full court press to all hands on deck kind of thing. Again, you see March 23rd. Again, hopefully it's not going to be before then, or I mean, it's not going to be until then. It'll be before then. Like even right now, we're going to start seeing this full court press toward trying to really get testing, test kits, and all this stuff implemented. Hopefully by the time we get Mars going into Capricorn, and then Jupiter also in Capricorn, we'll start to get this, at least this virus spreading somewhat under control, hopefully, where at least we have a plan that's not just self-quarantine, quarantine, nobody go out, because that's going to really, really damage the economy for a long time. I mean, that could be much more long-term. Hopefully it's not that long-term, it's more short-term. And I definitely see where that could be the case, because now we'll have an exalted planet and the ruler in Capricorn. And again, I go back to what it was when we first found out about this and we had exalted Venus up here. And during that time when Saturn and Jupiter were here and then Venus was exalted, again, it wasn't correct, but it seemed like it wasn't the panic. It wasn't the, okay, everybody stay home and don't go anywhere. That started after Venus went into Aries. So hopefully this exalted Mars joining Saturn is going to help us get this done. But I think there's going to be these corrections to the economy and stock market and whatnot, I think are going to be, again, not permanent, but they're showing a real flaw in the system. And hopefully our leaders and whatnot wake up to these realities and start putting in corrective measures to make this better, especially our economic systems here. But for right now, for at least the next couple weeks, or I think for a while, we're going to see this strain. Let's hope. Again, let's hope. And I'm saying this as a possibility that we're not going to see this whole, global economy collapse. Again, when people start talking like this, you have to realize, you have to be careful, because this is the last thing that anyone wants, and the people in charge especially. So when we get this whole thing that, they're all going to just let it all, again, we see also, of course, the ungrounded crazy, it's just a conspiracy because we're all going to be in FEMA camps and we're going to get microchipped, and they've been wanting to do this forever so we can all get vaxxed. And okay. Sorry, I don't believe it, because I've also been hearing it forever, and that's just not going to happen. Sorry, I ain't buying it. Call me crazy. Don't think that's what this is. This is all about them. Okay, no. They want this world to be the way it is because they want legions, billions of obedient workers supporting their system. If we're all dead and vaxxed and in FEMA camps, they're not doing too well either. So that's not what they want either. Okay, just to put that out there. And so, but again, looking at it just kind of sensibly from my point of view, I think this is what we can expect here for the next, this transit of these planets through Capricorn, particularly with the two exalted planets of Mars and Saturn, I think is going to, show some benefit. Mercury is also turning direct. Mercury's been retrograde. Again, I talked about this in a Mercury retrograde forecast yesterday. You should watch it because I talked about, look at Mercury before Mercury went retrograde. Again, all of this started when Mercury went retrograde. All of the like, oh my God, now we're freaking out. This has been a big shift in the last few weeks, right? Again, I haven't really even mentioned things like the politics of the world, especially in the US, all the big shifting. We're like, oh boy. So Mercury starts going direct, and it's also going to start moving some of this forward, I think. Again, you can look at this very much literally with this coronavirus thing, especially. This stuff started to really be there, and the leaders are like, oh, who knows? Like Mercury retrograde, like, yeah, we'll get to it. We'll just say anything. It'll be fine. Yeah, there's only 10 cases in the US, even though we know there was like, 200 at the time. I'll just say anything. I'll just be my usual rambling, word salad, diarrhea of the mouth self. And we'll just say anything like we've been doing for years. Since we got in the White House, we just say anything and nothing really happens as a result. Okay, now we're seeing the result. And I think a big part of the reason the markets are responding is they're like, Jesus Christ, what is going on? We just want to know. Again, this is what makes the markets crazy, is the uncertainty and having the administration just throwing anything out there to they're playing politics with it. It's all a matter of trying to say, it's not our fault. We're not doing anything wrong. We're great. We're being great. It's great. We're fantastic. And the markets are like, man, you guys, what are you doing? Just let us know what's happening so we can plan, okay? We just want to know. So with Mercury going forward now, I think it's going to correct that. Hopefully the biggest part will be that the egoist in chief will just frankly shut up and stay out of it. How about that? Again, this is the problem. He can't. He's got to go somewhere with his hat on and just start talking. And markets panic. As much as they've gotten used to it over the few years, in general, and this is not the time to do it. Maybe he'll listen to an advisor that says, please shut up and let health professionals talk. Because when the health professionals talk, it's actually really not that bad. But they're having to clean up where, he has to just bullshit, for lack of a better way to put it. He can't stop just being a bullshitter. So hopefully, maybe, pray that the bullshitter in chief shuts up for a while. Instead of this retrograde, like, oh, I'll just keep saying anything stuff. So Mercury going direct will hopefully also make some of that a little bit better in this sense. So we can get a kind of handle on that sort of thing. Now, the other thing that's coming up is the last time we had a Saturn-Jupiter conjunction. The last time was in 2001. And that last Saturn-Jupiter conjunction in Taurus also had a restrictive effect on the economy back then. And I don't remember. There was, so when Saturn and Jupiter come together, there's often a, pretty intense pressure where, I'm just looking here. Sorry, there was something. Yeah, anyway, so I thought there was something more here that I'm not seeing now for some reason. But anyway, it was this period in time. We had, if we look here, Saturn-Jupiter conjunctions don't happen. As you can see, they were, yeah, look here. Yeah, this was also close to that this whole time in 2000. Look at how they danced together for a while. Saturn-Jupiter were in Taurus for quite a while. Now, again, the full conjunction isn't coming until Saturn goes into Capricorn into next year. But yeah, so we have that in 2000, and then even into 2001, they were together, as you can see, March, and again, of course, even for much of 2001, and then Jupiter moved on. So again, this was a lot during that time, also of that election of Bush, that George Bush election as well. Or no, by then they had moved on, yeah. Or no, 2000, yeah, the election of 2000. Sorry, stumbling here. I meant to get this together before, but yeah, so this was also during that election, that 2000 election. That's what I wanted to talk about. Sorry for stumbling here. During that 2000 election, and again, this was around this time, that Bush-Gore election, you had all this retrograde planet. All of this was when they were deciding the president at that time. If you remember the 2000 election, Bush and Gore, and the recount and all this kind of stuff, as we go forward, and I'll do another video about this, but I'm talking about it because of Saturn. Again, Saturn-Jupiter coming together here. Now it's in Capricorn. It was in Taurus before, but the energy tends to get stuck. This was one of the main things that I wanted to point out. Very similar to the way energy was stuck during that election. Or, well, you know, literally, like, it was, we had the election and then the vote, you know, they literally like reversed it. But we were stuck after that election for months, or for like a month. And you can see what's going to happen is then in 2021, look, now we get it. And then Jupiter moves on. But you can see how Jupiter is going to then, at the end of this year, Jupiter goes in again. And then we have this going on. Jupiter goes retrograde and joins it again. So Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions, the point is that when they come together, we see a lot of like faded kind of, type of destined karmic like energy going like, because they'll go retrograde together, like we see here. We see this coming up here. Now they both turn retrograde because when they're joined, they're both opposite the sun because they're in the same place. So they'll go retrograde together. So again, this also plays into a lot of the kind of stuck energy. And one of the things Saturn and Jupiter both show is again, things like financial issues. Again, also spiritual issues. Literally things like our spiritual practice and our gurus and our teachers, and committing and concentrating and focusing on those things. And again, in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn, I think it could be quite auspicious for all of that kind of stuff, because Saturn is the planet of that, and of solitude, introspection, but also kind of destroying our false beliefs. So we're going to be seeing a lot of this happening, and even a sort of destroying our false beliefs around money and wealth and value, and oh yes, I'm growing, I'm expanding. Jupiter is really, in many ways, this planet of, it can really be a planet of greed and expansive, like mindless monetary expansion if we're not careful. This is one of the reasons why when it goes into Capricorn, we can tend to lose it or have it taken away, to sort of correct that unhealthy relationship that we would have with it. So the other thing I wanted to, this was something, and I didn't really look at this very closely before I jumped on here. I found this Hong Kong flu, 1968, 1 million dead. And it was first reported July 13th, 1968. Forget the ascendant and the moon. I just wanted to look at the placements of the planets here and see if there's any similarities to this mass death. One of the things that I said is that when it started, the coronavirus thing, is the first things that I said is that I thought a lot of the deaths would be that I don't think it's going to have this like mass death. I hope I'm wrong. And, you know, part of it might just be my wishful thinking. I hope I'm wrong. But especially because when it started and when it came out, when we first started hearing about it, especially at the time when I was looking at it, now this is around the time when it first came about, but when I was looking at it, I was, you know, mainly reading a chart that showed the exalted Saturn, Jupiter in Sagittarius, Venus being exalted, and really hoping this would be a good sign that there's going to be assistance to come and contain this thing. That hasn't happened as much, and so we're seeing this spread. But, you know, again, given the fact that Saturn is here and Jupiter is also here in Sagittarius for most of it, not to mention what's going to happen too is when we look at Venus, Venus is going to go into Taurus here in Venus is going to go into Taurus here in early April, and it's going to be in Taurus through the summer. You know, it'll be in Taurus into August, I believe it was. And so again, during this time, there could be a lot of, into August. Venus going into Taurus, very auspicious. So during much of this, Venus is either exalted or it's in Taurus. And again, that's very much about caring for each other, nursing, and again, assisting each other. And this bodes well for it not being this mass epidemic of, you know, the Hong Kong flu, which killed 1 million people or something like that. I think we're going to bring together the resources to not have it kill all these people, to kill like millions and millions of people. I don't think that. And again, even looking at this chart, I don't see a lot of similarities. This had a debilitated Saturn, all these planets in Ardra. Now, one thing I do see, though, I just have to look at, though, is that the first corona death, again, we had this, oh, this is the wrong chart. Oh, yeah, I just moved this around. It's actually, yeah, we had this eclipse up here. I'm in the wrong year here. Sorry, let me get this forward. Is that first corona death was actually, again, we did have the eclipse. We did have that eclipse up there in Ardra Nakshatra, which brought it about. So again, this was the chart where we saw the first death. So we do have this relationship with Ardra. Forget the ascendant, but we had this eclipse up here, and this was the Hong Kong flu time. So it's not surprising that we see something in Ardra, and then again, but we also have a combust Mars. We have debilitated Saturn. Even Venus is, well, it's not very strong there in Cancer. So to compare that with these charts where, yeah, I don't know. I'm not so thrilled with all these planets in Mula that started it either. So I don't know. We'll pray. Hopefully we're not going to see this mass death, these mass casualties. All these planets in Mula that really, I think, was the kind of catalytic event that really started it, doesn't bode well for how this could play out. But again, like I say, I think that going forward with Saturn in a good dignity, because Saturn is in Capricorn, and again, that's very powerful. And I think, like I said earlier, with Mars going through Capricorn. I think in the next, and you see this is April. By early May, I think that by early May, hopefully, which is a couple months, I think before then, especially with Mercury going direct, I think through April, hopefully, we're going to get a real handle on this. March and then into April, as Mars and Jupiter are both in Capricorn. Again, this is auspicious because the rulers are there, and Mars and Saturn are the planets that destroy things and fight to destroy things. So I think that, again, as we see through April, so even by late March, March 29th, we have both Mars and Jupiter all in Capricorn. I think during this time, we're going to really be beating it back. It could also be escalating in other ways, but it's going to be a time when hopefully the world can come together around our common purpose to eradicate this. And hopefully by the time we get into May and Mars starts moving forward and leaves, we will have gotten a handle on it. And again, by that time also, you'll see that Venus has now gone into air. Venus has gone into Taurus, which also happens in the exact days. Venus goes into Taurus here on April. What is the date? Yeah, on March 29th. So the end of March, again, that's also going to be really powerful. The end of March, all these things shift. Venus goes into Taurus, Mars, Saturn, Jupiter are all in Capricorn. So by that, once that happens, again, of course, between now and then, we're still going to be doing hopefully a lot more than we have been. And especially the people in the US and around the world, it seems like the rest of the world has been doing better. US getting testing kits and testing people, for God's sake, will start immediately, like it should have been. But we'll start to really turn it around in ways that we hadn't up until then, hopefully. And this is what the astrology is showing, is that especially by the end of March, Venus is in her own sign for a couple months until early August. That's more than March. It's like April, May, June, July, and then into August, of like 4 months. And then we have also Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter, particularly Mars and Saturn, trying to destroy the weakness. Again, we could definitely be seeing some financial hits from this, though, as well, as I said. So this is what we have here. So Heavenly Angelic is saying, when will it be over? Anyone know astrologers accurately predicting when it will be over? Heavenly Angelic, how do we know if they're accurately predicting when it's over, when it's not over yet? Okay, so I get what you're saying. No one knows yet because it's not over yet. You're not going to know it until it's over. And by the way, I'll just also tell you that even myself as an astrologer, I will flat out say that we try to downplay, I do at least. There are some astrologers that want to just fill the world with panic. And again, people can do that. First of all, I don't see it that I don't see it. I am showing you what I'm seeing. And I was just very honest about the fact that this coming when we had this eclipse in Mula doesn't bode well. It could kill a lot of people. Again, hopefully it's not going to be millions and millions. And I'm showing you what's coming up right now. That's the best that I can do. As far as predictions, there's all kinds of ways that things can also go, particularly when you have there are other things like we still have Rahu is going through Ardra and Ketu through Mula and all kinds of things that are mitigating that. Again, as Ketu goes through Mula, it shows where there's going to be deaths. This is going to kill some people. We already see it. We already know it. I'm not saying anything new. We're talking now about mitigating it so that it doesn't destroy everything we know, which again, that is overdoing it. What we're now looking to do is to try to contain and have it and have it be something that we normally see. And by the way, we also have to look at the fact that there is also quite a bit of hysteria surrounding these things now. And we have to not get so paranoid. We're also seeing that. We're also seeing the paranoia, again, because we have flus and viruses all the time. How many people die from the flu? How many people die from things all the time? Again, I'm not sure that it's going to exceed people that have died from the flu. 50, 60,000 people a year die from the flu. We don't track it. When someone starts dying in the flu season, we're not tracking that the way we're now tracking this. So we also have to cook into this thing that we're also conflating it a lot with the media and whatnot. We don't say, oh, flu is reported. Now this person died, flu, died, the flu, died, flu. All right, everybody dying. We don't do it. We also know with this is that the survival rate, it seems to be really focusing on certain weak people, elderly populations, and those who have had issues with lungs and things like that. We're seeing a profile. For example, in South Korea, they've done the most testing. South Korea tested, I think, like 16,000 people. And of those they tested who had it, again, they still don't have an antidote for it. Those who tested, they had it. The death rate amongst those they tested was 0.5%. So it's not 3 to 4%. It's been 3 to 4% amongst those who have reported. But again, there's people walking around that don't have it. So you can't trust that 3 to 4%. So for example, you may have it and not know it. So again, the fact that you might get it, you're like, oh my God, what if I have it? Well, as it stands right now, if you're in a high risk group, like you're of a certain age or you have certain weaknesses and tendencies and other high risk factors, for example, that greatly increases it. But if you don't, and you're not in those categories, the paranoia is not necessarily as justified yet. And hopefully these are the kinds of things that are going to start making more sense also as Mercury goes direct, because Mercury is turning direct in a couple days. And rather than just being freaked out and paranoid by all this stuff, more good information will start coming out. And we're going to start, first of all, our leaders, especially in the US, will stop just bullshitting, excuse my language, but that's the only word for it. Enough bullshit about this. That doesn't make anybody happy and makes people more nervous. And we'll also start looking and saying, and these risk factors and all this will be more grounded, and we'll stop getting so freaked out about it. And it'll be something that we're more in control of and not feeling so upset about. Again, there's that part of it, but I also absolutely see the practical solutions right now aren't going away soon. This self-quarantining and all of this is going to go on for a while. So hopefully we get it contained, and we can look. One of the things is if we get good testing, then maybe it won't be so necessary to self-quarantine. Now we might think we have it and we have no way to test. So this is why people self-quarantining, instead of all that crap, maybe we get testing so that we know how to test it, and everybody can test and stop self-quarantining. And if you test and you have it, then you self-quarantine, but you don't just go, oh, I'm not sure, maybe I have it. That's paranoia. It's paranoia because we haven't had a good solution yet, because it's been too new and all the resources haven't been focused on it. So hopefully this is what's going to happen. I think this is what's going to be happening. We're going to be like, okay, all hands on deck, get testing at least so that we can test whether or not it's there. And then things can start to return to normal a little bit, and people can start doing that. So that's what I would say about this right now. I hope this was helpful. And I know it's an excitable subject. People are excitable, and it's again, these kinds of things, I do it. I don't really enjoy it as an astrologer to so much, to such extent, because you gotta sometimes make predictions that people might die and all. It's not fun. It's not pleasant. And people are like, well, you didn't even say that. No, I didn't say it. I don't like predicting thousands and millions of people are going to die, especially because you're not really sure. I'm trying to show how these things can happen. And even now, there's much more paranoia than there is results. It's not that, even at this point, the number of cases that have been reported relative to how many have died, the percentage is low. This is why I will go back to my initial predictions, is that I don't think it's going to be millions and millions of people all around the world are going to die and it's going to wipe us out and it's going to be all this. No. In many ways, a lot of the effect of it so far has been the unknown, the fear of the unknown. Quite a bit of that, I will say, in the US has been driven by the fact, whether people like it or not, that our leader, quote, has been the typical, Keystone cops of just who knows what they're doing. And that doesn't make anyone, that doesn't comfort anyone. And so, yes, I'm sorry, but that is part of it. Of course, they're not to blame for it or anything, but they're certainly to blame for what they do. They're certainly to blame for what they say and contributing to people going, what in the world is going on here? Now, again, when the medical experts in the government are speaking, it's actually quite comforting because you can see they know what they're doing. But when they're contradicting the people that are supposed to be in charge, it's like, man, this is not going to work in this example. So I think hopefully now that's going to turn around. So I'm going to leave it at that. And yes, as someone said, the paranoia comes from a lack of real information. Yes, that's it. It hasn't been a big thing here in the US yet at all. And even overall in aggregate around the world, it's not killing these mass numbers of people. It's not Ebola. It's not you get it. It's a death sentence. You can get it and walk around with it like you have a cold. And unless you're in a very at-risk demographic, it's not going to kill you. It might not even be symptomatic. So we have to keep that in mind as well. And especially South Korea has tested extensively, and it looks to be about 0.5% of those who have been tested. I would bet it's even lower. That's my feeling. Again, maybe I shouldn't say it's my feeling, but I'm saying it because as testing has improved, it's just shown that the overall death rate of those who could have it is lower. And again, the reason this is important is because if that's the case and we have good data, that means that we will feel more confident moving around and not just self-quarantining. So the big thing right now is we need testing so that we can test ourselves, so we can test. When that happens, we don't have to just be functioning through paranoia, saying, I don't know, maybe I have it, I better not go out. Or if I've interacted with anyone who might have it, I better not go out. That means all of us could just stay home. I mean, I'm getting ready to go play tennis. I live in San Diego. One of the off-ramps was Miramar here in San Diego. God knows. I mean, there haven't been a lot of reports here, but I'm going to go play tennis. We're all holding the same tennis balls. And there haven't been a lot of reports, but what, am I just not going to live? No, I'm going to go out and live. So we have to live. And we're going to get better information moving forward with Mercury moving forward. And then with these planets going into Capricorn, exalted Mars with a powerful Saturn, it's going to get more handled. So I'll leave it at that. And we'll just leave it at that. And I hope this was helpful for you to hear. And again, just last thing, if you are interested, again, I have the 2020 forecast for those who haven't gotten it yet. And I talk about those, those 10 important shifts that can really help you in your life. And for this upcoming year, one of the big ones was talking about this transit of all these planets through Capricorn. So check that out as well. And you all take care.